Good evening. We're glad you're joining us. My name is Jordan Minnick-Keesbo, and I'm one of the pastors here at Fusion. Tonight we're celebrating Good Friday, which, contrary to the way the name sounds, is a conflicted day. It's a day of darkness. It is a day that we hold that Jesus died. So tonight we're going to take some time and have some worship music. We're going to have some reading of Scripture. And we're going to live in that tension of Christ crucified. So tonight we've invited the lead team at Fusion because what happens at Fusion is more than just me and Steve and Taryn. It's more than the teaching team that you see regularly on Sunday and on these videos. There's a whole team of us. And so all the scripture readings are from members of our lead team who are helping to lead the church. They're normal people just like you all who are helping us kind of guide the direction of this movement. In addition, Ashton, who plays keys tonight, is also a member of the lead team. So would you join us? Would you worship? Would you pray? And would you feel the tension of this day? This is not a happy-go-lucky day. It is a day that is conflicted. It is a day that is hard. It is a day that we need to feel grief. So take some time, worship, pray, take this in, and we're glad you joined us.
Jesus, having prayed this prayer, left with his disciples and crossed over the brook Kidron, at a place where there was a garden. He and his disciples entered it. Judas, his betrayer, knew the place because Jesus and his disciples went there often. So Judas led the way to the garden, and the Roman soldiers and police sent by the high priests and Pharisees followed. They arrived there with lanterns and torches and swords. Jesus, knowing by now everything that was coming down on him, went out and met them. He said, "Who are you after?" They answered, "Jesus the Nazarene." He said, "That's me." The soldiers recoiled, totally taken aback. Judas, his betrayer, stood out like a sore thumb. Jesus asked again, "Who are you after?" They answered, "Jesus the Nazarene." "I told you," said Jesus, "that's me. I am the one. So if it's me you're after, let these others go." This validated the words in his prayer. "I didn't lose one of those you gave." Just then Simon Peter, who was carrying a sword, pulled it from his sheath and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. Malchus was the servant's name. Jesus ordered Peter, "Put back your sword. Do you think for 1 minute I'm not going to drink of this cup that the Father gave me?"
Then the Roman soldiers, under their commander, joined by the Jewish police, seized Jesus and tied him up. They took him first to Annas, father-in-law of Caiaphas. Caiaphas was the chief priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had advised the Jews that it was to their advantage that one man die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. That other disciple was known to the chief priest, and so he went in with Jesus to the chief priest's courtyard. Peter had to stay outside. Then the other disciple went out, spoke to the doorkeeper, and got Peter in. The young woman who was the doorkeeper said to Peter, "Aren't you one of this man's disciples?" He said, "No, I'm not." The servants and police had made a fire because of the cold and were huddled there warming themselves. Peter stood with them, trying to get warm.
Ananias interrogated Jesus regarding his disciples and his teachings. Jesus answered, "I have spoken openly in public. I have taught regularly in meeting places and the temple where the Jews come together. Everything has been out in the open. I have said nothing secret. So, why are you treating me like a conspirator?" Questions those who have been listening to me. They know well what I have said. My teachings have all been overboard. When he said this, one of the policemen standing there slapped Jesus across the face, saying, "How dare you speak to the chief priest like that?" Jesus replied, "If I've said something wrong, prove it. But I've spoken the plain truth. Why is this slapping around, then?" Annas sent him, still tied up, to the chief priest, Caiaphas.
God, I give you what I can today. These scattered ashes that I hid away, I lay it all at your feet.
Meanwhile, Simon Peter was by the fire still trying to get warm. The others there said to him, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" He denied it. "Not me." One of the chief priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, said to him, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" Again, Peter denied it. And just then, a rooster crowed.
They led Jesus then from Caiaphas to the Roman governor's palace. It was early morning. They themselves didn't enter the palace because they didn't want to be disqualified from eating the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and spoke. "What charge do you bring against this man?" They said, "If he hadn't been doing something evil, do you think we'd have bothered you?" Pilate said, "You take him, judge him by your law." The Jews said, "We're not allowed to kill anyone." This would confirm Jesus' word, indicating the way he would die. Pilate went back into the palace and called for Jesus. He said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you saying this on your own, or did others tell you this about me?" Pilate said, "Do I look like a Jew? Your people and your high priest turned you over to me. What did you do?" "My kingdom," said Jesus, "doesn't consist of what you see around you. If it did, my followers would fight so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Jews. But I'm not that kind of king, not the world's kind of king." Then Pilate said, "So you are a king or not?" Jesus answered, "You tell me, because I am king. I was born and entered the world so that I could witness to the truth. Everyone who cares for truth, who has any feeling for the truth, recognizes my voice." Pilate said, "What is the truth?" Then he went back to the Jews and told them, "I find nothing wrong with this man. It's your custom that I pardon one prisoner at Passover. Do you want me to pardon the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Not this one, but Barabbas." Barabbas was a Jewish freedom fighter.
So Pilate took Jesus and had him whipped. The soldiers, having braided a crown from thorns, set it on his head, threw a purple robe over him, and approached him with, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they greeted him with slaps in the face. Pilate went back out again and said to them, "I present him to you, but I want you to know that I do not find him guilty of any crime." Just then, Jesus came out wearing the thorn crown and purple robe. Pilate announced, "Here he is, the man." When the high priest and the police saw him, they shouted in a frenzy, "Crucify, crucify," Pilate told them. "You take him, you crucify him. I find nothing wrong with him." The Jews answered, "We have a law, but that law he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he became even more scared. He went back into the palace and said to Jesus, "Where did you come from?" Jesus gave no answer. Pilate said, "You won't talk? Don't you know that I have the authority to pardon you and the authority to crucify you?" Jesus said, You haven't a shred of authority over me except what has been given you from heaven. That's why the one who betrayed me to you has committed a far greater fault." At this, Pilate tried his best to pardon him, but the Jews shouted him down. "If you pardon this man, you're no friend of Caesar's. Anyone setting himself up as king defies Caesar." When Pilate heard those words, he led Jesus outside. He sat down at judgment seat in the area designated Stone Court, in Hebrew, Gabbatha. It was the preparation day for Passover. The hour was noon. Pilate said to the Jews, "Here is your king." They shouted back, "Kill him, kill him, crucify him." Pilate said, "I am to crucify your king?" The high priest answered, "We have no king except Caesar."
said, forgiven at the cross. Oh, to see the pain written on your face, bearing the awesome weight of sin. Every bitter thought, every evil deed, crowning your blood-stained brow. This the cloud of the cross. Christ became sin for us, took the blame, bore the wrath we said, forgiven at the cross. Now the daylight flees, now the ground beneath quakes as its maker bows his head. This the power of the cross, Son of God, slain for us. What a love, what a cost we stand, forgiven at the cross.
Pilate caved into their demand. He turned him over to be crucified. They took Jesus away. Carrying his cross, Jesus went out to the place called Skull Hill. The name in Hebrew is Golgotha, where they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, Jesus in the middle. Pilate wrote a sign and had it placed on the cross. It read, Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read the sign because the place where Jesus was crucified was right next to the city. It was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. The Jewish high priests objected. Don't write, they said to Pilate, the King of the Jews. Make it, this man said, I am the King of the Jews. Pilate said, what I've written, I've written. When they crucified him, the Roman soldiers took his clothes and divided them up 4 ways, to each soldier a fourth. But his robe was seamless, a single piece of weaving, so they said to each other, let's not tear it up, let's throw dice to see who gets it. This confirmed the scripture that said, they divided up my clothes among them and threw dice for my coat. While the soldiers were looking after themselves, Jesus' mother, Aunt Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene stood at the foot of the cross. Jesus saw his mother and the disciple he loved standing near her. He said to his mother, woman, here is your son. Then to the disciple, here is your mother. From that moment, the disciple accepted her as his own mother.
After this, knowing that everything was already completed, in order to fulfill the scripture, Jesus said, I am thirsty. A jar full of sour wine was nearby, so the soldiers soaked a sponge in it, placed it on a hyssop branch, and held it up to his lips. When he had received the sour wine, Jesus said, it is completed. Bowing his head, he gave up his life. It was the preparation day, and the Jewish leaders didn't want the bodies to remain on the cross on the Sabbath, especially since that Sabbath was an important day. So they asked Pilate to have the legs of those crucified broken and the bodies taken down. Therefore, the soldiers came and broke the legs of the 2 men who were crucified with Jesus. When they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead, so they didn't break his legs. However, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. The one who saw this has testified, and his testimony is true. He knows that he speaks the truth, and he has testified so that you can also believe. These things happened to fulfill the scripture. they won't break any of his bones. And another scripture says, they will look at him whom they have pierced.
After all this, Joseph of Arimathea, he was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, because he was intimidated by the Jews, petitioned Pilate to take the body of Jesus. Pilate gave permission, so Joseph came and took the body. Nicodemus, who had first come to Jesus at night, came now in broad daylight carrying a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. They took Jesus' body, and following the Jewish burial custom, wrapped it in linen with the spices. There was a garden near the place he was crucified, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been placed. So because it was Sabbath preparation for the Jews, and the tomb was convenient, they placed Jesus in it.
Christ alone, my hope is found. He is my light, my strength, my song. This cornerstone, this solid ground, firm through the fiercest drought and storm. What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are still, when striving cease, my comforter, my all in all, here in the love of Christ I stand. In Christ alone, who took on flesh, fullness of God in helpless babe, this gift of love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save, till on that cross as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. For every sin on him was laid. Here in the death of Christ I live. There in the ground his body lay, light of the world by darkness slain.
Normally the service would end with some silence and some darkness and some space. We don't know how to create that in this digital space, but I would encourage you as you need to take time. Don't rush past this. One of the great grievances that I have with Easter is that sometimes we jump to the resurrection too soon. We have the privilege of looking back and knowing how this all shook out. That was not the case for people who were living the moment. Much like right now, there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of sadness. There was a lot of questioning. It was a very dark time. And so if you find yourself in that dark place today, that's okay, and you're not alone. If you need someone to talk to, reach out to any of us on the staff or the lead team at Fusion. We'd be happy to chat with you. We want to be community together in this time, just as the disciples were community to each other in the loss of Jesus. It's fitting that we're celebrating this Easter season in the midst of all that is happening around us. Because this is a time that is very tricky, that is very gray. And yet we know that Sunday's coming and there will be a resurrection. So don't go there too fast, but know that this is all going to work out. And it's okay and it's good and it's necessary to feel the grief and the pain. And it's okay and it's good and necessary to know that the sun will rise again.